right, welcome back. This is the Pens and Guns podcast. I'm your host, Mitch Bowler, and today we are talking with Cindy Hohman from artmarketingproject.com. So, Cindy, I always ask this to start off. Give us the 1 to 2 minute overview of who you are and how you help people.
Yeah, so I help artists with marketing and selling their work. So what I do at the Art Marketing Project, my little elevator speech is that I help artists be effective and efficient at marketing and help empower them to take the reins themselves of those, business processes so they can get back into the studio and not worry about the marketing and the sales so much, because artists can only the only person who can create your art is you. And so, so at the Art Marketing Project, I have, different ways that I help support artists in that, learning those things and making smart decisions in their business.
And so what type of artists do you find are most like naturally attracted to? Can you put people into certain boxes, or is it just anyone making art in the world?
Yeah, it's interesting. I have been learning that over the last few years that I've been doing this, which is I have worked with a broad range of artists. So I work with traditional artists who are, painting large abstracts in oil, and they're represented in galleries or festivals, and they're looking for different ways for selling their work. But I also work with, and I really enjoy, the more unique artists. One of my favorites that I'll tell you is my friend Casey, who is a fantasy illustrator. But then she also does pet portraits, commissioned pet portraits. And she's super unique, and her work is very unique. And I enjoy that because for a marketer like I am, having a very unique audience is very interesting. And you can be very targeted, and you can find those Comic-Con kind of people for KC. They're easier to find than just people who might be interested in an piece of abstract work. So I work with artists on both ends. I've worked with some quite successful ones who just wanted to understand how all the pieces of marketing came together so they could be their own marketing director more successfully. And I also work with artists who are kind of just starting out and selling their work. And I think it's helpful to both sides, because when you're just starting out, having that foundation helps you make smart decisions from the get-go. If you've been successful in selling in festivals, but you need to start selling your work online or getting out there and building an audience, I can support that as well. So it's been pretty broad, but I'll tell you, I have a couple of photographers in my membership. I don't tend to work with hand makers or craft kind of folks. That really isn't my niche. It's really more on the fine art side, but definitely I have a couple of jewelry makers and a couple of photographers as well. So
awesome. And do you find that the advice that you're able to give them, does it even, I think it's cool that it's so broad, but I'm wondering, is the advice applicable to everyone? Is it the same kind of, I don't want to say cookie cutter, but principles really, that It doesn't matter what you're doing, it's the same thing? Because I feel like as artists, we sometimes feel like we're unique and we're different. It's like, yeah, that worked over here, but it will never work for me because I'm doing it with airbrush or whatever right. The thing is that we think we're unique, but actually once you come down to it, it's like we're all creating some kind of visual thing and want people to come and buy it.
Right, and your work needs to be unique, and you need to be unique to be able to sell your work, because if you're just like everyone else, it's, you fade into the background. So, yeah, the way that I handle like I said, I have a membership, which is a month-to-month arrangement with artists. I have a 6-week course or 6-module course that I've built that really teaches the fundamentals, because I teach marketing at the university level as well. So this is really my academic side says, here are the things you need to learn about marketing. Here's how the pieces work together. Here's how, like I tell people all the time, they love this, my little story, which is, or my charge to them, which is, you're not going to walk into a bar, or you should not walk into a bar, sit down next to somebody and ask them to marry you. So if you think that you can go out and find somebody on Instagram today and they're going to buy your work tonight. It's not going to happen. So I teach about that whole, like, the process that the consumer, that your buyer needs to go through in learning about you and engaging with your work and with you as the artist, and then moving down that path to buying from you. So that, that process definitely is, that's why it's a pre-recorded, course, because all of those lessons are the same across the board. But then what I do in addition is I do coaching calls twice a month. And in those coaching calls, that's when I say, okay, your unique situation. Yes, so your ideal buyer is X. So let's talk about how we find them. And yes, we talk about all the different marketing tools that you can use. But if your audience is, 75 years old and above, or CEOs, 6 or 7 figure income CEOs, you're not going to find them on Instagram. Ignore Instagram. You need to be here and there. So I help, they have that kind of fundamental learning of, here are all the tools at your disposal, but then those twice a month calls that I do are really nice because I can bring my expertise to the table and say, in your particular situation, here's how I would handle it, and that combination is really nice, because I wouldn't want to put this 6 weeks course out there and just say, here you go, watch this, go through the lessons, and you'll be a rock star marketer at the end, because it's not true. Everyone has to make decisions based upon their work and their style and their audience and where they live and all of those things.
So I think that's an interesting thing that you brought up there, that that you can't just go through a 6-week course and then you're a rock star. I found that there's a real balance that happens with making art, that it's kind of like 10% learning and 90% application. And when you can get these things in balance like this, like, it might be a little bit different depending on what you're learning, but there's far more doing than there is learning. But with marketing, do you feel like it's a similar kind of breakdown of knowledge versus experience? Or is it something that you really are just missing a few key, let's just call them silver bullets here? I don't know if it exists. It probably
Right.
like depends on who you're asking. But yeah, with marketing, do you find that you still have to put in tons of time like you do with developing your craft?
Yeah, marketing is a marathon and not a sprint. Marketing and selling your work, regardless of the kind of business that you're in, period. So every business owner out there, CEOs of major corporations and their marketing people, as well as independent artists and people like you and me, it is a marathon. It's work that you have to do consistently. And if you think you can, I learned all I need to learn, and there are just these 3 things that I have to do, and I'm just going to do them, and then I'm going to ignore things for the next 4 to 6 months, it's not going to work. And it's funny, because I think, artists that I work with, either many of them, not many, it's probably fewer of them, have an understanding of marketing, but don't understand, like, the implementation side, or they don't understand marketing as a whole, but they kind of understand some of the implementation. So I find artists who are like, okay, I get how marketing works, but I don't know what to write on my website. I don't know how to create a blog or why I would. I have no idea how to find my audience. But then I also find artists who are like, so I've been posting on Instagram like 8 times a day for the last 6 months, and I don't see any benefit from it. It's like, well, the combination is what is important, which is a strategy, and then doing the work based on that strategy.
Yeah.
And so the balance there, like you said, is there's definitely that learning. And I think maybe from my perspective, it's more like strategy. There's like the maybe 20%. You need to understand and put together a strategy. So you're not spinning your wheels trying to sell your work to everyone on the planet. I talk to so many artists who are like, marketing just feels icky, kind of creepy. I feel like I'm pushing my stuff on people. I'm like, but it's because you're trying to push your stuff on the wrong people.
Yes, exactly.
If everybody who shows up in front of you, you see as a possible buyer, then you're going to feel smarmy. You're going to feel like you're pushy, because honestly, you're being pushy with people who wouldn't be interested.
I think this is really the big challenge is finding that right person, because you're not. I think you create this thing and then you're like, well, it's this beautiful piece of artwork. It shouldn't everyone like this? And it's like, no. And there's something that comes to mind here. I went to a Comic-Con and it blew my mind. I talked about this before in the podcast. There's an artist who only made paintings of owls, and they're really beautiful. And I was like, oh, that's interesting that you can have a business just painting owls. And just when you said this, I thought of another friend that I have who works with owl conservation. And if they did an event where they joined up and be like, hey, there's this artist who's painting owls here. They're going to do a live demonstration while we're having our meeting, and you can see some of the work. That's a room full of people who are
Owl people.
Some of them they will follow you on Instagram, and they might not buy today, but they're going to be curious about what you're doing,
Right.
and who knows. But I think this is the real, like for me, one of the big challenges, and I think for a lot of people, is that if you want to apply for a job, like for me was, I want to be a video game artist, so I could make video game artwork and create a portfolio, and I feel like that way was very clear what I was doing.
Right.
But if I was to take that to doing illustration, I feel like all of a sudden it's become scary again, because illustration is so broad. It's like,
Yeah.
what do I do? I kind of feel almost paralyzed thinking about it right now. How do you help people move through this?
Yeah, I think, it's really on a case by case basis. It's kind of having that conversation. I do a lot of talking about your ideal buyer and your brand. So those are kind of the two core pieces of strategy, in my opinion, and the way I teach, which is, it makes sense. You've got to know who you are before you'll know who would be attracted to what you're doing. A lot of what I do with artists is just reminding them of the idea of testing what you do. Just because you create a certain type of work right now does not mean your style isn't going to change, or that you might find other things that are interesting to you. But yeah, I have coached artists on it's kind of like market research, right? It's, hey, here are the three kinds of work that I create, and I have an idea of all the different ways that I could sell it. I could put it on mugs, I could, create reproductions of it, I could sell my originals, all these different things. And I recommend all the time, like, reach out to your audience, whoever you have who kind of fit into your ideal buyer descriptor, and sit down with three of them and ask those questions. No business on the planet can come up with what they sell in a vacuum. They create it, they take it out to the market, they see if there's interest in it, they find which is the most interesting to the market, and they look at what other things are being created. How does what I create, is it unique? Are there others who create similar things? If, like I said, when you're a landscape painter, there's a heck of a lot of landscape painters out there. There are a heck of a lot of landscape paintings. If if that's what you're doing and it's absolutely where you're going to, nope, this is the style that I create. It's like, that is a huge market. It's a ton of competition in there. So basically, like I said, just taking the artist through the ideas of, like, reaching out to your audience, do a little bit of research, even the idea of testing. Like in my business, we call it a beta, right? Which is creating something new and putting out to your audience and saying, would you pay something for this? Half price, half of what you think it would normally be. See if you can get people to take you up on that, and then follow up with them afterward and say, all right, so what is it about this that you like? How much would you have paid for it? And taking that kind of, it's almost like a research and development, like a approach to, and I understand as an artist, it's hard to kind of take that approach to your work, but sometimes you have to just take a step back and say, do I even know what my audience is interested in?
Mm-hmm.
And am I creating work they're interested in? And if I'm not, I might have to ask myself the hard question, of what am I willing to adjust here? Or, create reproductions or print my work on different materials or whatever it is. So So yeah, that's probably a long version of answering your question,
No,
but
it's good, and it brought up new questions as well.
oh, good.
Um, because I think if you already have an audience, and I was wondering, thinking about this false positives while you were talking about this, because I see artists who look up to other people on whatever, DeviantArt. I see this is from my world, right? And what I've realized is that there's all these. We think that the art, it's like we see this our sliver and we see it as being so big, but there's all these slivers that are all so big. Like art is just this enormous market. Um, so I see people and they see another artist on like DeviantArt or Instagram or maybe Facebook, and like, well, they're getting commissions doing X. I can get commissions doing X. But what they and that is, it's not untrue, but what they're not considering is the size of that person's audience. So
Right.
they know this artist because this artist has done a good job of building an audience. They might have,
Yeah.
hundreds of thousands of people, or maybe even millions in some cases of people, of eyeballs on their work. And so
Right.
you see them getting commissions. You're like, well, oh, look, they're doing this sometimes weird thing. I can do this weird thing too. But what you don't realize is that out of a million eyeballs, they might have enough people hiring them for commissions to sustain them, but
Right.
it actually took a million eyeballs. And
Right.
so when you don't have the audience, how do you start? I mean, I have ideas, but I'm not the expert.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's probably, I talk about it a lot, which is, you know, all of us, regardless of what you're selling, there's probably, I think what I've heard is like like a 3% sales rate from your audience is really good. Really good. That's a single digit. So if you have an audience on social media of 500 people and 25 people on your email list, what's 3% of that? I'm not good at mental math, so that is not my skill, but I do know that that's not much. And so yeah, I talk about it all the time, like building that audience is just critical. I talk about a number of ways of doing that. It's I've, and for every artist, it's unique to their particular skill, right? So yeah, being interviewed on podcasts, on video series, kind of new media opportunities. There's the traditional media opportunities, like, pitching your story to the local news media. There's also, things like that a lot of artists, every artist I talk to say, oh, Facebook ads, they don't work. I'm like, that's not true. I disagree. Because every one of us who doesn't know how that kind of advertising platform works will go out there and throw $50 at it. And then when you didn't have a clear goal set, and then you don't meet the goal that you didn't know you had, you go, oh, yeah, that didn't work. I'm never doing it again. And there's a process there. There's a way that you need to do things in any form of advertising to reach your audience, find eyeballs, then bring them in to engage with you and take them down that path. And so I think it's, definitely social media is a way to do that as well, but it's harder these days than it was 5 years ago, 3 years ago, just because of algorithms and Facebook and Instagram shifting toward, the algorithm doesn't show everything that you put out because they want you to pay money to get your name out there. Yeah, it's a combination of things, and I think it really comes down to one of the first lessons that I have in my course is in the business world we call it a SWOT analysis, but for a independent business owner is like, what are your strengths and weaknesses? What are you good at and what are you not good at? If you're good at public speaking, if you're not uncomfortable with that, go book yourself some opportunities to speak in public. That can bring a big audience. Go partner with a large organization, like you said, like, if you, I talk a lot about if you are a landscape artist, but you paint a particular style or a particular type of landscape or location, like you can find organizations who are focused. There are a lot of organizations in the country focused on the natural world, Nature Conservancy, and even places like REI who sell outdoor gear. There are a lot of opportunities for you when you have an idea who your buyer might be. You just got to be creative, and you got to be not shy. You got to put yourself out there and pitch yourself for a podcast, to be interviewed, and approach somebody for a partnership. But finding those, even partnering with an artist in your community who has a large audience, find people who have larger audiences and partner with them. That gets you seen. So yeah, it's like I said, it's unique to, I think, each artist as to what feels comfortable to them. And I have one artist who I work with who is quite comfortable with technology. And so like the whole Facebook ads platform, she's comfortable with it. I just have to coach her through the process of running your ads in a way that actually will bring you sales rather than throwing $50 at something with no goal. But she's comfortable with that technology. There are a number of artists who wouldn't be. Right. So, yeah. So I think a lot of it comes down to there are opportunities for bigger visibility. You need to, number one, not be afraid to go after them. And number two, you need to make sure they align with, like, if you are super uncomfortable speaking in public, don't try it. Find some other, something else that feels more comfortable to you. But in all of those big awareness things for artists, I think in general, you just have to say, this makes me super uncomfortable and I'm going to do it anyway.
And so just for anybody who's been listening along here, go back and listen to the last 5 minutes or so if you don't have an audience, because I feel like this snippet that Cindy just gave us, right there, I feel like you could leverage this into 1,000 or 2,000 people in not that much time if you just consistently set aside this as part of your time budget to work on this thing and getting in touch with other people who have existing audiences. I think it's fantastic. And it's very, very doable. Like, I just feel excited having moved back, a couple of years now to my old hometown. I'm just like, there's so many opportunities that I haven't taken advantage of. I haven't talked to the local newspaper about what I'm doing. I think it's pretty cool. And yeah, there's tons of opportunities to be more known here locally for me. And so yeah, I think it's fantastic that I just wanted to call it out, because often we're listening to these podcasts and we're consuming so much stuff that it's just like, okay, I listened to that, I got it, on to the next podcast. I'm like, no, this is it. Like, if you don't have an audience, you don't really need that much more than just the last 5 minutes to kind of write those down, and which of those things could you do. And then if you don't know how to do them, you could reach out to Cindy, you could reach out to other people, you could do research on it, but help is out there for you to connect the dots, because I think that's the other piece of the puzzle that's missing. And you have your membership, which is very affordable for artists to just connect directly with you and learn right from, go right to the source, and you've already had experience doing it for a lot of other people, so it's very straightforward. So
yeah, and I'll tell you what, like, I run my own business, and am I super comfortable launching a podcast? Makes me nervous. Am I super comfortable going on Facebook Live once a week? Nope. Those things scare the heck out of me too. But I know what I understand, and I agree with myself on the fact that, like, an audience, your sales depend on the size of your audience. The bigger the audience, the better. And I know these things, so I go out and do them. So, like, my action item for artists would be write down which things sound good to you, write down the other things that sound uncomfortable, and do them anyway, and set a plan. Tell yourself, once a month I'm going to reach out. I'm going to do one of these audience building activities, or once every other month, whatever it is. But make yourself a checklist and a to-do list, and just do it, because it's really easy for all of us to say, yeah, I'll do that someday. And then someday doesn't come, especially when it's putting yourself out there to build an audience, because it's frightening. It's frightening for all of us.
Yeah, the thing that I like to think about is all those things that you wanted to do that you should be doing. It's like, how long have you actually been putting them off? Like, when is it going to be the time, right? You said 5 years ago, I'm going to do the thing. That was 5 years ago. Like, and even 12 months ago, you were going to do the thing. It's just, it's actually in jeopardy of never being done. At some point, you just have to jump. And I always felt like mentally, when I've had to make these it could be inconsequential to some people easily do this stuff. It's no problem. They can do certain things. And we all kind of have strengths and things that we're afraid of. But for me, I always felt like I was sitting on the edge of a cliff, and often I needed somebody to push me over the edge, like just be like, just do it. And then once now you're falling, you're in it. There's no getting out. Once you like commit to doing the thing, then you realize, okay, this wasn't so scary. It was actually way scarier not making the decision.
Right. And that's a lot of what I do in my coaching with artists, is the same thing that I get from the coach that I work with, which is, you need to do that. You know it. Why aren't you doing it? Well, this and that, and here's why, and I feel uncomfortable. No, just go do it. Well, nope, just go do it. When are you committing to doing it? And so I do that a lot. And the artists who I work with are like, oh, thank you for that push. We all need that push. We all need somebody to say, the reason why I launched a podcast is because my coach, I said I'm much better at talking than I am at writing. And I feel like my blog becomes hard. It's just hard for me to put together. I don't enjoy it. And he's like, well, launch a podcast. I'm like, well, and we all have those excuses. Well, I can't because this, and I don't understand. And like I told you when we were chatting before this, it's like, my coach said, hey, your first 5 episodes are going to suck anyway. So just go record your 5 crappy episodes and be done with it. And that's what I tell artists too. They said, oh, well, I don't know who my ideal buyer is, and I really struggle with this. And I tell them, go create your crappy first draft of an ideal buyer profile. Because if you don't start somewhere, you're never going to get anywhere. And so I do a lot of that pushing of like, yeah, no, that excuse isn't valid. I think you're just pushing this off because you really don't want to do it, but you need to do it. If the goal is making money from your work and you're working with me to help get you there, so I'm gonna give you the push. And and I asked them, I'm like, so okay, I got the date written down. I know when you're doing this, I'm gonna follow up with you. And they're like, oh yeah, great. Like it's like, thanks so much. And also like, yeah, I know you are. It's like excited and like, yeah, she's gonna hold my feet to the fire. So.
And do you find that the artists they're breaking through, like they're taking the action, and then they're like, wow, this opened up a whole new realm of possibilities for me. Like I didn't even. Sometimes I feel like we don't have the belief that when we're hiring or working with a coach that it can get to be. We can get to the other side. Like the analogy that I often think about is surfing, when you're kind of in the impact zone and the waves are just crashing over you again and again and again. You're like, oh, my first time surfing, I thought, am I literally going to die? My surf coach and this other like way more in shape guy, they were like way past it, and I was like struggling and just like floundering around. I was like, I'm almost at the point of exhaustion where I feel like I need to turn back because I could die here. They were serious waves. They weren't like the little baby waves when the instructor just pushes you out while he's standing or she's standing.
That's the only surfing I've done is the baby waves. Yeah.
but I made it through, and it's like it's like the clouds parted and everything was okay, and I was like, wow, I can't believe it's like this. And I've had experiences like that in running my business where it's just like, wow, there's an easier way to do this. Do you find it's like that for a lot of people that you're working with as well?
Yeah, we just had in my membership, like I said, I do coaching monthly with artists who are in my membership, but we have once a month master classes who I bring in outside experts to teach on topics that I am not an expert at. And so one of my friends came in and taught a creating video master class. And every artist out there is like, and the questions that I get, so how can I create video without actually showing my face? And I'm like, you need to show your face. We all can do this. You can do it. You're a person. You're a beautiful human being, and the world needs to see that. And so we had this, I had probably 4 people in my membership who sent me similar messages of like, well, here's a question for the masterclass. Can your friend Zach tell us how to create video without being seen in it? And I said, well, I think we're going to need to talk about just feeling comfortable with being you and being seen. And then so I, like 6 artists after this masterclass reached out to me and said, that was life-changing right there. Like just the idea that I can be on video this whole masterclass was like, here, we're going to have a plan. You're going to have a bullet pointed plan for what you're going to say when you get on video, so you don't get there and stumble through your words, and you're going to get some practice at doing it. And so many of them were like, that was phenomenal, just phenomenal. Now I feel like I can use video as a tool, which they also understood why video is an important tool, because it humanizes you. And people get to know you as a person. And that's how they always say in the online business world that video is the quickest way to warm up an audience, is by letting them see you as a human being, And so, yeah, I've seen those breakthroughs. It's like I always say, marketing is a marathon and not a sprint. So I can't tell you in the 3 years of running this business, the Art Marketing Project, there's not an artist who I started with 3 years ago who's now selling 6 figures a year, but I have artists who are like, oh my gosh, over the holidays, I've had the busiest holiday season I've ever had after I started working with you. Or just there's the little things of like, I feel like I can be seen as a person and people want to hear from me, which is honestly, that's a big breakthrough for an artist who needs to be seen so their audience will engage with them. They may not see it yet as the big breakthrough that it will be in their marketing, but they're having those little breakthroughs of, oh, now I understand how to tell my story in a way that my audience would be interested in. Oh, now I understand who my audience should be. And so, yeah, we get little breakthroughs, we get bigger breakthroughs, but I always tell people, like, if you're looking for that person to work with who's like, yeah, so you're going to sell 6 figures in the next, work with me, to sell 6 figures in the next year. I'm not the person you want to work with, because I'm not going to sell you that line. I know that this is just ongoing regular work, and you're going to see little breakthroughs, and I'm going to push you when you need to be pushed. But it's a process of building your business. And so yeah, the little breakthroughs, those are the incremental ones. Yeah, we see them and they're great. I love seeing that.
I think for me, the idea of it's not a sprint, it's a marathon, and switching, like just mentally switching those tracks, it made a lot of things more manageable. It's like, I always felt like, oh, I'm not going fast enough. Things aren't, right. I'm not where I should be. And then when I had a marathon, I was like, oh, I have time to relax. I have time for family events. I have time to like enjoy the process. And I think that's so crucial. It's just like enjoying the moment. It's not like putting your happiness on some kind of future event happening. That right. If you can start to enjoy the whole thing, you're making art for, hopefully, because you enjoy it. And it's a good alternative to things that you don't enjoy. And right. Looking at it as like, well, it might, I don't know how long it will take me to get to where I might ultimately want to get to, but if I'm enjoying today, that's enough. Like, that's a great place to be. Not a lot of people can say that they're enjoying the moment.
Right. Yeah. And I recorded, so my next podcast episode that I recently recorded is about, I don't know, maybe number 5 or number 6, but it's about mindset. And one of the biggest things that I think all of us as small business owners, whether you're a fine artist or, you're me helping artists, resiliency as a business owner. You need, there's a YouTube video that I've seen of some kid on like a, not a roller coaster, but one of those, it's almost like a zip line, but it was, and the kids, and he's going and he's like, oh, this is really cool. This is really cool. And then he screams out of like abject fear, like, I'm going to die. And then he's like, okay, wait, things have slowed down. Oh, this is really fun again. And he starts giggling, and then something happens again and he starts screaming bloody murder. And it's like, yeah, that's the journey of an entrepreneur. And you have to be okay with that. If you're not okay with those hills and valleys and and learning resilience around this, that I have a goal that I've set for myself and I'm going to get there. And the lessons that I learn along the way are just going to help me. If you just say, oh, you know what, that didn't work. I tried something, it didn't work. I'm done. I'm never doing it again. You know what? You're never going to make it. So having that resiliency of seeing this as a marathon is very important, because, you can't run a marathon in 5-minute, like all out sprints. You're going to end up on the side of the road, like, well, not in a good way. Yeah. Yeah. You're going to find yourself not feeling very well. And, so that's, you can't do it that way. You have to have that long-term resilience and say, I'm working toward a longer-term goal.
So I've got 2 questions to wrap up here. The first one is, who is the right type of artist to work with you? Is it the person who's full-time, all in, I am an artist, or is it more of the hobbyist doing things a little bit here and there? And I feel like people that are like, I might like to sell my work, but I don't really know. So I would say they're more at they're less committed, maybe is one way to look at it. Like they're definitely not all in. Which of these two is the better person for your membership?
I have a hard time saying which one is better, because I think as long as you have a commitment that you want to learn how to sell your work, especially in this new environment between, in person, online, what are all the different ways to sell? I think it's just a matter of commitment, whether you're, getting back into this after spending 25 years in a career doing something else because your parents told you had to. Or if I work with a couple of artists who are just out of art school, they're younger. But I think the common piece is a commitment to that marathon, to doing the work and selling their work. I don't think like what stage you're in matters as much as just that overall commitment.
Okay. So then the next question is, what do you say to somebody who they're so generic that it's hard for them to stand out, or they can't see the possibilities that are out there? So let's just say, for example, someone is doing portraiture, but there's nothing really special about these. I've had guests on the podcast before where they're creating portraits and they're not selling, and like black and white portraits, and then as soon as they splash some paint on it, some paint drops, and now it looks artistic, they sell like hotcakes.
Right.
But I feel like there can be a mental barrier, like that we can't see how our works connects with other people because we're too close to the work. And so to then go and try and build an audience when you don't know how you show up in the world, or like what makes you special, how do you help these people change that to realize what they're actually doing and how they can stand out?
It's interesting. One of the big lessons inside my course that I teach and I talk about a lot in my membership overall is an artist understanding their brand, which is not your logo. It's what is at the core of you as the artist and the work that you create. And I had a number of artists recently in our group Facebook, our member Facebook group, who said, I am learning more about my art through this lesson than I ever learned in art school or any of the the creative process lessons that I have taken over my career as an artist. And I think that's what I tend to do, is to ask artists to go back to that. Who am I and what is my work at its core and what are the foundations? But like you said, in talking to artists about, if you're creating work that just isn't selling, I like to have those conversations, and I like being that third party person. As a marketer of 25 years, I have it's been my job for years to understand consumers and to kind of pay attention to the market. So I really like to have an artist like pull up their work in one of our coaching sessions and say, you know what, I'm going to be very honest with you. And I think I care about people, and that comes across. So I think the artists who work with me understand that it comes from a place of helping and compassion rather than just being critical. But I'll say, you know what, here's my honest truth, as I'm an art collector myself. And I own a heck of a lot of artwork, and I shop art all the time. And I'll say, from the point of view, from a collector, an art buyer, and from a marketer, I think you might need to look at the work that you're creating. But I'll ask them to do the work on their end of talking to their audience, and doing some investigation, even if it's just with, the people who are closer to you. I always say, don't ask your brother, your sister, your mother, because they'll tell you everything you create is beautiful because they're completely prejudiced. But find people who have some, who are not prejudiced, in your favor, who can give you some real honest advice on that, and do a little asking. If you want to sell your work, you're going to have to put work in front of people that's interesting to them, that they're interested in buying and owning. And so it's a hard thing to have to accept and pursue as an artist, but it's a balance that you have to strike. So, and I am not shy about being the person to say, I think that's something you're going to need to look at. I'm not sure what you're creating at the moment is really as sellable as you think it is. And here are some steps. Here are three steps I'd like to see you take to go investigate the sellability of your work. So yeah, I mean, it's a hard one though, because it's so
crucial.
Personal. It's crucial, but that's the thing. It's like, if you don't want to sell your work, create whatever the heck you want. If you do want to sell your work and it's not selling, that's one of the questions you have to ask yourself. And you have to ask yourself, am I willing to change the work that I create somewhat in whatever way, that I find out, or am I willing to test different ways of creating work, or different styles, or different approaches? Are you willing to do that? And if you are, great. And if you're not, you might just want to say to yourself, I create work just that I love, and I'm going to give it to friends and family, and I might sell one here or there, and just don't expect too much from that.
Yeah, I think it's a great way to be realistic. But if you want more, to realize that there's help out there. You don't have to just keep smashing your head against a brick wall endlessly, which is usually my default mode, and it can turn. I found that working with a coach, it might take you a year, and you can get to like an amazing new reality, and you can usually figure this stuff out on your own. It's just like 6 or 7 years to do it on your own.
Exactly.
If you want to do it that way, that's fine. But if you want to do it in a more efficient way with somebody who like cares for you and has been there before and helped other people, then obviously having a coach is a great way to do it. So where can people find you online? What are the best places to reach out if they wanted to know more about what you do?
Yeah, so my website, artmarketingproject.com, is where you'll see a lovely picture of me right in the very beginning, and on the homepage. And then Instagram is probably the best place to connect with me. Same thing there. My handle is Art Marketing Project, and I try not to spend my entire day on DMs in Instagram, but I always tell artists, please send me a message there, say hello. And I just launched a new podcast, and surprisingly enough, it's called the Art Marketing Project Podcast. So I'm like, do I need to come up with a brand new name for that? Nah. I like the name I have. So, and that just launched, so you can find it on iTunes and Google Play and all of the podcast listening places. So
awesome. And as usual, we'll have notes for this episode over at pencilkings.com/show. So thank you so much, Cindy, for hanging out and sharing your knowledge with us. And we'll be back next week with another episode of the Pencil Kings podcast. It's
been a pleasure.
That's it for the episode of the Pencil King Show. Thanks for hanging out. If you're watching us on YouTube, you can always grab us on iTunes if you want to listen in the car, at the gym, whatever you want. If you are listening and you want to watch and see what's happening, you can always go over to YouTube and look up Pencil Kings and you'll find us there. We'll be back next Wednesday with another episode of the show, and until then, stay creative.
Demands patience, skill, years of practice.
Ah, you talk like a fool. I would trade a century of practice for an ounce of inspiration.